Welcome to Norton Rose Fulbright's YouTube channel, Energy Transition, The Pace of Change. I'm Andrew Hedges, a partner in the energy team in London. And today I have the pleasure of hosting Anthony Hobley, Co-Executive Director of Mission Possible Partnership and an Executive Fellow of the World Economic Forum. And I've known Anthony for years, and he has been a leader in this space for most of that. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for coming. I just want to kick us off with asking you just to introduce yourself and Mission Possible briefly, and then we'll dive into some of the points that are really at the cutting edge of energy transition and how your initiative is tackling that. Thanks.
So Andrew, it's wonderful to be here. And you know, unlike many people, you got the name right. So Mission Possible, not Mission Impossible. And it is fantastic to be here on the Norton Rose Energy Transition YouTube channel because as a former partner at Norton Rose Fulbright, it's sort of wonderful to be back and a former colleague of yours. So Mission Possible, what is that all about? Our focus is on the so-called harder to abate sectors, so heavy industry and heavy transport, aluminium, heavy chemicals, cement, steel, aviation, shipping, and trucking. And I think it has been felt for a long time, or the perception has been that these sectors are incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to decarbonise. One of the partners in the Mission Possible partnership, the Energy Transitions Commission, and our original partner, the original partner with the World Economic Forum in launching this initiative, issued a report, a very detailed blueprint at the back end of 2018, laying out how you could actually decarbonise those so-called harder to abate sectors, and in a sense demonstrating that they're not really harder to abate. We have all of the technologies, and so that name harder to abate is a bit of a misnomer. But you know, like many things, when you're going into a transition, as we have with wind and solar and electric vehicles and batteries, you know, back in the day, the technologies are more expensive. There's a cost differential, or a green premium, as Bill Gates likes to describe it. But they laid out a plan for how you could actually go down a roadmap in each of those sectors over the next 30 years, scale those technologies, effectively reach net zero in cement, in steel, in shipping, in aviation, as difficult as that may seem. But we've got to start a process to get there. We can't leave it to the 2040s and the 2050s, which I think has been the issue until recently. So we've got to start that process. We've got to start this sort of virtuous flywheel going that Nigel Toppin, the UK's high-level champion for COP26, often talks about, where we've got to build high ambition groups of industry, the suppliers. We've got to build high ambition groups of customers down the supply chain, high ambition groups of financiers and governments, to effectively replicate what we've done with previous technologies and get us into the S-curves and the scaling of those technologies. And that is what we're about. So in each of these sectors, we've been building high ambition coalitions of companies, of steel companies, of aluminium companies, of shipping companies, and getting them to effectively work out what is that blueprint and how can they play a role in driving the systems change that's going to be required to decarbonise those sectors. And we're a partnership between four organisations: the World Economic Forum, the Energy Transitions Commission, the We Mean Business Coalition, and the Energy Transitions Commission. I think I got that right.
And from our perspective, we see huge change, particularly in my area, looking at Europe, where both policy direction and companies appear to be really coming to the fore on new sectors, whether it be green hydrogen or blue hydrogen or significant electrification in industrial processes. So it feels like the 2020s are the turning point for some of these sectors. Are you seeing that as well in the actual action plans that the Mission Possible is developing? Is that level of enthusiasm or commitment is now turning into real action?
Absolutely. But like anything, you have leaders and followers and laggards in all sectors. But we are seeing in each of these sectors a significant, a material number of companies and governments in many cases who want to move faster, who want to get the transition moving. And I think the good news is you don't need to win everywhere to begin that transition. You just need to start the process in some places if your objective is to start developing and scaling the technologies. And I think that's what we're seeing. So if you just take one of our initiatives, the Getting to Zero Coalition, which is over now 150 companies across the full maritime supply chain and I think 14 governments, they are furiously working towards the goal of putting net zero vessels in the deep sea lanes on a commercial basis by the 2030s. So that means, a number of working groups trying to make decisions like, what fuel are we going to choose? How do you design ships around that new fuel? How do you retrofit ships? What infrastructure is going to be required? On what major trade routes should we start that process of building that infrastructure so that we're ready by 2030? And so for that sector, the 2020s will be a furiously busy decade of making those decisions, doing that work, designing those new vessels, testing them and scaling up to build them. So from the 2030s onwards, that technology can be implemented and scaled, and emissions reductions, dramatic emission reductions can be achieved during the 2030s and the 2040s. So I mean, it's all about action and getting the process going. It's not about producing more reports. It's about getting buy-in to the technological roadmaps, agreeing with the companies and governments, we hope in many cases, on key milestones in those roadmaps and working to deliver those and all the tools that are needed to make it a reality.
Right, understood. And I guess that is what the World Economic Forum brings to it. It's known for both the quality of the companies involved, but also the access to government. So hopefully bringing the two together for these action
Absolutely.
plans.
Well, and it's not just the governments. I mean, the World Economic Forum, as you probably know, is an international organization like the Red Cross, with a premier organization for public-private collaboration. So the World Economic Forum has built communities across most sectors in the economy. We have thousands of members. I think something like 70% of the sort of, is it the FTSE 2000 or the Dow 2000? I mean, the top 70% of the top 2,000 companies in the world are members of the forum. And we have that CEO engagement, built up over decades, and it's mobilizing the CEOs in many cases. Or in fact, I think actually it's the other way around quite often. I think in the last year or two, it's CEOs mobilizing us, because I think we're seeing unprecedented business engagement at the CEO and C-suite level in this issue, in net zero, in climate ambition, which, to be honest, for someone who's been, like yourself, and like many probably watching this involved for many years, actually gives me some, significant glimmer of hope. That CEO cut through is critically important, and in many ways, I think they're bringing business to the table in a serious way.
No, I've heard that from talking to people about sort of TCFD and other sort of climate risks, that it's a completely different response for business when the CEO asks the question of the business versus a sustainability officer, even at the senior management level. It does cause a response. And do you have a sense of why the CEOs are changing? Is it just the wider dynamic, or is it institutional pressure from investors, or what, in your view, is really sort of making them wake up to this now, if perhaps they weren't as switched on 5 years ago?
I mean, it's probably multifaceted in many ways. I mean, I think, the speed at which we're seeing the energy transition finally play out with technologies, moving up the S-curve, scaling, coming down in cost, the same with EVs and batteries. The demand, the recognition of this issue, both politically and also, the movements we have seen on the ground in the last few years, particularly, pre-COVID, but ultimately a recognition that this transformation is critical to the survival of their businesses, and that their business plans need to adapt and they can't be left behind. And that I think the recognition that this is that decisive decade where we need to start the transition.
No, I'd agree with that. I think that sounds correct, and also perhaps realizing in the sense that climate risks and opportunities, that this is also the decade to get your business ready to be a leader in new sectors, new technologies, etc., to be dominant in the post 2030s, when that starts getting rolled out more widely.
Absolutely, and I think there's good examples as well of there's some trailblazers. One of the companies that's very active, and the CEO, the new CEO, Mads Neppe, of Orsted. Orsted is an amazing story. What used to be, and you will probably know it from days of project finance and renewables projects as Dong. What used to be the Danish oil and natural gas company, not a Chinese wind developer, as I thought for a while, is now Orsted, one of the biggest offshore wind companies in the world. And I think by next year they'll be completely out of fossil fuels, including gas. Yes, it was a relatively small national company with a lot of government support, but it demonstrates what's possible. And I think, even the big oil and gas companies are now looking at how do they transition their, business models in such a dramatic fashion. So I think, in energy, this is the energy transitions channel. That's the topic. Is key to the industrial transition. I think these heavy industry sectors that we're working on, depending on how you count it and what assumptions you make, account for something between 30 and 35% of energy demand / fossil fuel demand. And for many years have been cited as one example why, oil and gas companies, and coal companies need to continue to explore and develop new resources, because heavy industry is always going to need oil, gas, and coal. I think our work is demonstrating, that isn't a given. And actually, even this, these last bastions and citadels of high carbon can transform to net zero. And, in it, key bit of the work we're doing is proving the reality of that.
Well, Anthony, thank you very much. I guess last question. I think it was almost 20 years ago, I once went to a seminar where you were talking on some of these issues around climate change and around reducing emissions. And you've certainly been a leader for a long time. Are you positive? Do you think we're getting there, or we're really needing to pick up the pace even more so?
Well, we certainly need to pick up the pace. We've got just shy of 30 years to get to net zero, and then beyond. But I am actually quietly positive and optimistic. There's a reason, I chose to come and take on this role with Mission Possible, based out of the World Economic Forum, because it's not the World Climate Forum. And, to see the World Economic Forum engage in, not just in heavy industry, in so many areas, related to the climate agenda and climate action, gives me a huge amount of hope. That we're finally this issue is finally mainstream, and organizations like the World Economic Forum and the CEOs, who are a key part of the work of the forum, take it seriously, must give all of us hope. But clearly, we can't rest on our laurels. We need to keep up the pressure and work hard, because 30 years is not a long time for the transition that's required, as we all know. Yes.
Not for an entirely new technologies. Well, anyway, thank you very much, Anthony Hobley. You've been a fantastic guest on our YouTube channel, Energy Transition, the Pace of Change. Everyone, thanks for listening. Please don't miss the next one. Subscribe, watch, and enjoy. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you.